Welcome to the Marshall Pruett Podcast and a week in IndyCar. This is kind of a listener Q&A podcast here. Doug Boles, call you president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where you're sitting, also IndyCar president. Have you picked up any other presidencies we don't know about? This has been a year of gathering roles and responsibilities, my guy.
No, I have not picked up any others, and I really have no intention or nor do I have a desire to pick up any others. Have certainly plenty to do in both of these positions, more so on the IndyCar side than the Speedway side, frankly. I mean, the Speedway side, I've been doing it for 13 years or however long I've been in this position here. And we've got such a great team here. For me, it's much more focus on the IndyCar side. Obviously, you've been around the sport, been on the team side back in the day, and have a pretty good grasp of it. But just really trying to dig in and be supportive of folks and continue to learn the nuances that maybe I didn't deal with when I wasn't dealing with IndyCar every day. So I'm good with the two jobs I have. I don't need another one.
Well, your counterpart over in IMSA, John Doonan, he's president of IMSA. He's also picked up the presidency of their HSR, Historic Sports Car Racing. Two of our favorite presidents of racing series. You've got a lot of meetings to attend. Let's say a big thanks, as always, to our show partners and the Justice Brothers this year, Doug. Again, you know your IndyCar history better than just about anybody. 80 years.
It's crazy.
For the Justice Brothers at the Indianapolis 500. And also our friends at TorontoMotorsports.com, great purveyors of modern motor racing memorabilia. Wanted to bounce around all over the place with you, talking about the year for you as an individual, some of the happenings in IndyCar and otherwise. So why don't we start off with you on the personal front? What are some of the things you learned year one of being IndyCar President?
I guess I can operate on less sleep than I was already operating on. I've sort of learned that, so that's been the first thing. You know, going back to those days of cramming for finals at college and not getting a lot of sleep. I've had a lot of nights like that over the last year, and so I maybe have aged a little quicker than I would have back as a 21-year-old in college. Certainly feeling good about the fact that I can still survive on a little bit less sleep. I think honestly the thing that was maybe the most challenging for me was just getting involved in a lot of the competition side of things. Obviously, we had some things that happened early in the year with some teams, and then we had the issue in May, and then Detroit. We just continue to have these competition issues, and it was amazing to me. Maybe not amazing, surprising in a way that it sort of derails your ability to focus on the long game, because you get involved in the short game and really trying to figure out how to solve some of those issues. So really what I feel like my strength is less about the competition side, and then really getting everybody together and thinking about how do we grow this series? What are the things that we're doing to continue to grow the series, especially on the backs of a great TV partner like Fox, and now a partner like Fox. So I think from a personal standpoint, I don't think I anticipated the hours and time and challenge and detail related to just the competition side. Having been on the competition side, I know how important it is from a team's standpoint to be focused on those rules. You want to be as close to the edge as you can be. That definitely was the thing personally probably that impacted me the most, just dealing with those pieces of it. But then the other thing on the flip side, the thing I've certainly I've always loved the Speedway. My first love in terms of motorsport is the Indy 500, but I always loved IndyCar. And I think what's happened to me over the last 6 or 7 months, really as the season started and really got into the summer, it's really reignited my passion for IndyCar racing and for the teams and the people that are committed to it, and the hours those teams put in, the promoters, all the work they do. And while I loved it and felt like I was passionate about it, even before this job, this one has just sort of reignited that, and you just see how great the IndyCar series is and the great opportunity we have to grow it. So those are kind of the two flip sides of how the year played on me personally.
Interesting. Your predecessor, Jay Fry, had been there for a good while. He commonly spoke of himself in the media, certainly from the paddock, as viewing himself as the league's commissioner, really that kind of traditional stick and ball kind of commissioner. And you were very clear, as you just mentioned from the outset, of like, am I going to be telling people what kind of washers and hardware to use? I don't know if I'm going to be that guy. Part of this evolution of IndyCar's leadership with you coming on board, in a case of trying to map out the technical and competition side, why don't we go there? So we know that Bill Pappas had been a part of that
Yep.
matrix for a long time. Bill departed here a few months ago. You've been looking for some senior folks there. I believe might have introduced or shared some of this new structure with team owners. Can you speak to that side? Because we know we have the overarching leadership capabilities with yourself and others, kind of on the ground, nuts and bolts side. What are you doing with that with IndyCar for 2026?
Well, obviously, completely involved in all of that. I think back, one of the things I don't think people realize when I took this position, I was obviously one of the founders of Panther Racing, set a race team up, was the chief operating officer there, so I understood that component of it. But if you remember back in the day, when Chevrolet was struggling with their engine early in the season, I believe we were like 2003 maybe, and really was one of those folks that led the effort to change that engine and help develop the Cosworth engine that became the Chevworth or whatever from the Chevrolet standpoint. So having been involved in the engine side of things and the rule side of things as we were developing that in 2003, I'm not in an area that I'm completely unfamiliar with. I'm definitely not Bill Pappas or other folks who had those real, true engineering backgrounds, but certainly been heavily involved. I think Mark Sibila, Darren Sansom, Tino Belli. We've got some really smart people who are working on not only rules for 26 and 27, but working on rules for 2028 when the new car and the new engine format comes out, and been pretty involved in those. Dallara obviously is a great partner that I've known forever, and being able to work with them as we think that through. And then with both of our engine manufacturers, with Honda and Chevrolet, one of the first things I did after being announced as president of IndyCar was go to Sebring to the test that we had in Sebring and spend time with both of the manufacturers. What did they like? What did they not like? Where are we deficient? What are the things we can do? I learned an awful lot in 2 days of just spending time with those manufacturers on what they like about IndyCar, what the things are that are challenging with IndyCar, and the places where they thought we ought to be investing from an IndyCar standpoint to make things better. So we're definitely out there continuing to look for sort of a head of engineering component that hopefully we can have that all sorted out before we get into too far into the new year in 2026. And we're in a place right now where we're trying to make sure that we're set for 26 and 27, keep the competition where it is. But our focus is going to turn pretty soon to a lot of effort to make sure when we roll out that 2028 car to kick the season off in 2028, we've got super competitive, reliable, and exciting car and engine formula going forward.
Stay in this area for a little bit, Doug, because again, it obviously fascinates me because I write about it, constantly, and fans really loving this as well. The new Independent Officiating Board, which was announced, and we've known about it, but the formal presentation of it just happening recently. I know that you went on the podcast with the Hinch and Rossi podcast, did a really good dive there on a lot of the aspects. I won't really ask you to repeat the same things about the IOB, but the area I would like to learn about, which does intersect with your world governing IndyCar and IndyCar's kind of operations and engineering department, spoke about, hey, we might want to do some enhancements in the technical inspection area, going to vehicle scanning, a range of new equipment and such. People would need to be in charge of that, and folks would need to look after that. With the IOB coming in as an independent entity, how much of what you do in race control, what you do in technical inspection in terms of the tools used, the practices followed, how much of an imprint do you think yourself, Penske Entertainment, will have there? It's one thing to have the people set aside to run it independently. It's another thing to say, yeah, but maybe these are the tools or the enhancements we want to bring personnel-wise, equipment-wise. Seems like that could be a little bit of an interesting dance to figure out.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and one that we continue to think through exactly how that works, especially with the advent of scanning and how that works. And I'll touch on that in a moment because I think we have a direction there. But just something that's happened since my Hinch and Rossi appearance yesterday, for the first time, our 3 IOB board members gathered together here in Indianapolis. They knew of each other, maybe not really knew each other, so to get them together to begin to go through the bylaws of the new organization, which is separate from us, and begin to set things in motion there. All 3 of them, Ronan's from Ireland, so he came in from Ireland, Ray coming in from the Charlotte area, and then Raj coming in from the LA area, and they went to dinner together on Wednesday night, spent all day together yesterday. They have some marching orders that they've basically pulled together what they want to do as we continue to prepare for the season. I can't I can't tell you how excited, frankly, I am to have this group in place. Obviously, understanding motorsport and really understanding people and how to put people together. And they've seen the best in all of in sport across the board. Raj had an awful lot of investment and time in DC, seeing how they work. Obviously, Ray does all kinds of things in terms of motorsports, seeing it all from the lowest level to the highest level. And then Ronan getting a chance to see things from the FIA and the international level. So I think the three of them will bring a lot of great ideas together and really be able to run the officiating side of the IndyCar series in a way that creates that firewall that we all want and makes us successful as we go forward. But in terms of things like technology and scanning, so for example, the tech truck that goes down the road for the entire tech team is brand new this year. So we've invested in a brand new tech truck, tech team. Our folks will transport it and get it there and turn it over at the end of the day once it's set up to the tech team and to the IOB to manage it. Still will be owned by us, but it will be completely run by the IOB. I'm excited that we had planned on doing this even before we got to the IOB side, so this is kind of a nice thing as they kick things off to go into a season with a brand new truck. Scanning is one of the areas where I think we have an awful lot of opportunity. I think, as you know, this year, following the Indianapolis 500, we impounded four cars, or the tubs and the crash structures. And as much as anything, we wanted to learn. We wanted to learn what's going on, figure out the reliability of the tubs. So basically, we took those tubs and crash structures and compared them to the three other cars that came in with them. So we compared all four cars to each other. We compared them to the CAD that Dallara has for the build of the Dallara car. And we also built up a brand new tub and a brand new crash structure and compared it to that. So as I said, it was as much anything for us to learn what's going on with the tubs and to learn, or to the cars, and learn how reliable they were. We also were able, through that, to see areas that looked like they were odd and chase down some things that were definitely odd on some of the cars there, and to begin to think, okay, we may not be able right now to put scanning rules in place that say you must meet exactly this, but what scanning can tell us is places where teams are taking advantage of some of the rules, and we can make sure that we continue to make sure that everything is on the up and up. We also scanned cars after Portland, and then we scanned 4 cars after the Nashville race. So it was just a learning opportunity for us. So when I spent a little time yesterday with the IOB, they spent most of their time on their own, as it should be, but we did talk about technology and scanning. And I think together what we've decided we'll do is we will invest in scanning, and between this year and the season, the 2028 season, we will probably do a lot of scanning just to continue to learn, so that when we come with the new rule book in 2028 with a new car, we can be able to easily say, okay, here are the scanning rules in which the box of the car must fit. So I think we'll do that together. It's not necessarily going to be used this year at all for rules enforcement. Like I said, it could lead you to a situation where you say something looks funny here, and if that's the case, then the IOB can decide to go on and pull cars apart and figure out if there's something there. One of the challenges we have with scanning, people say, well, why don't you just scan a car? One of the challenges we have is just how long this car's been around. And the car's been around so long that the materials sometimes have changed over time, so everything isn't exactly perfect. So by the time we get to 2028, one of the things that Dallara has really focused on is the repeatability of the parts and the ability for us to measure parts from each car identically in a way that we can really start using scanning as a true way to enforce rules. So I don't know if that's a long way to answer your question, but I'm excited about what the scanning opportunities are going to be, and we'll work together on what we can learn from that. And at some point in time, if the IOB says, hey, you know what? We think we know enough. We're going to take this over, and we're going to actually tell the teams that these are the things we're going to enforce, but that'll be their decision, not ours.
Yeah, the 2028 timelines always stood out to me as really the perfect one for introduction of scanning. Yep. And again, this is 3D, it's laser scanning, perfect representation of all the shapes, and you have the model loaded in beforehand that says this should be of this exact dimension, and if you scan something and find out, hey, wait a minute, that's out, it tells you right away whether you're in or out of compliance. And to your point, we still do have some older Dallara DW12s running. Many teams buy brand new cars every year, but there's still some that might have been a generation or two older build-wise where they wouldn't show up the same as others. There's also been a really positive thing to come out of this since some of the irregularities were found, particularly in May. And this is where I had one team principal tell me they went and bought, I think it was a rear wing end plate, brand new, and there was a bubble in it, bit of D-lamp, brand new.
Yep.
Had they put it on the car and tried to go through tech, it would have been in violation. It's not as if Dallara is doing that intentionally. These things happen, but there has been a positive of like, we're going to work towards tightening everything up.
Yep.
And as long as you're doing that, I have no complaint. It's when you leave such things where you have concerns. But it is good to hear, and I do know for a fact that, yes, everyone's working to tighten that part up.
Two things on that, and we can close that one out. But you touched on, you touched on one of them, and I think just the quality control, and Dallara is really focused on that quality control, because if you're a team and you're buying a part from Dallara, you expect that part you bought is going to scan perfectly. So teams know now when they get something, they see something that doesn't seem right, they go back to Dallara, and Dallara will either fix it or get another one. But Dallara is doubling down under quality control, so we don't have those issues. And then the other good thing is teams now are beginning to scan on their own. In fact, a couple of the teams that have actually shared with us their scan data after their cars were scanned, and then we could compare how did our scanning compare to theirs. And that's two ways to know if we're doing it right, but also for those teams to say, hey, this is what we see on ours. Let's make sure that we're aligned. And so I think over time, between teams, between us, and then ultimately IOB deciding how to use it, we're going to get a lot more sophisticated. And I think what this will do is it will make sure the playing field is even, but it also give teams that comfort level. When they go to the racetrack, they're going to know they've scanned it in their own shop based on stuff that they've learned together with us, so that when they roll off the truck, they're in good shape.
You've helped me with this multiple times over the last 6 months. I'll ask you to do it again now in video form related to the IOB. So the members, the 3 board members, the new managing director of officiating, they're all going to be in race control, telling them how to call balls and strikes, right? I'm kidding. That's not how it is meant to work.
That's
but
correct. Right.
Can you help clarify? Let's just pretend folks are learning about this for the very first time this moment. When we get to St. Pete, for example, it is race day, the green flag waves. What will be different in how race control functions compared to, say, St. Pete a year ago, pre-race or post-race tech, and those people now under the IOB governance? What will be different?
First of all, I'm going to guess on what's going to be different, because what we have done is we have literally said race control and technical inspection now lives under the authority of the IOB and the folks that the IOB decides that are going to be those folks. They're going to decide who's hired, who's fired, who we keep. That is all 100% from now on in the IOB. So I don't know exactly how it's going to be. I anticipate that from a fan standpoint, there's not going to be a lot different in the sense that you're going to have a race director and race control, which is going to function like race control does at an IndyCar race, which is similar to how race control works at an F1 race, for example. Those components will still be there. From the technical inspection side of things, I think it'll be the same thing. You're going to see those pre-race inspections, post-race inspections. There'll be a rule book that IndyCar will continue to write, but the IOB will have to go ahead and officiate it. The IOB has the authority to hire that managing director of officiating, and the idea with that person is that would be the person to whom the race director and the head of technical inspection and the folks that report to them would report. What I do know will be different, and I'm looking forward to, one of the things that the IOB is really interested in doing is making sure that there is more transparency. So when there is a rule violation, or when there is something that might have been considered a rule violation that isn't, I think you will see more transparency. And by you, I mean the paddock. So they will have ways to report to the folks in the paddock when decisions are made. So as team managers, people on the pit stand making calls, drivers will understand that if there was a penalty, here's why the penalty was assessed, and here's what the penalty is for that. So I think that we've not done a great job of, historically, not done a great job of putting those on in paper so that people can see them and understand. And the other thing that does too is I think that'll hold the group, the race directors, the stewards, the tech folks to a consistency, so it doesn't feel like, well, this team got this time, but last week he did it differently. I think that's one of the priorities that the IOB will have that I think will be different, that we'll all look forward to. The other thing will be different is when penalties are called, if there is an appeal process and somebody wants to appeal one of those, IndyCar, as in Doug Boles and the rest of us that work at IndyCar, won't have anything to do with it. It'll go through an appeal process that is completely separate from us. where I got caught in the middle of a lot of things last year where, people would say, hey, here's X, Y, and Z, we need to make a decision. And so whether it was some of the penalties that we had at the end of the Indianapolis 500 or the challenges that we had when it was in qualifying with teams there, I mean, those at the end of the day created some sleepless nights for me, or certainly some hard moments when you had to make those decisions. And I feel like the decisions that were made throughout the season were the right ones. But when you're making decisions, especially decisions with people that you know really well or you work for, there is that optics challenge. And I think that's the other thing that I think we can all sleep and know that the ruling is going to be, or the enforcement of those rules is going to be separate of all of us. And I think that allows us to work on, and the storylines to be, hey, how do you grow the series? What's going on track that's positive, and not a long time getting diverted and talking about how our rules enforced.
From a completely petty standpoint, do you take any joy in the fact that if a controversial call is made going forward and there's calls for folks to be fired, in theory, your name shouldn't be involved? And a lot of other folks' names who were through 2025, I'm kidding somewhat, but at the same time, as I mentioned on a previous little video chat here, like, hey, if you love it, give applause to the IOB. If you don't, blaming Penske Entertainment for whatever it is. That's really the big change going into 2026. This is being passed off to other people.
No, I'm not looking forward to not being there. My DNA is I want to be in the middle of everything and help and be part of it and be a teammate that's helping things get done. And sometimes you make decisions that don't make people happy, and or make some people happy and other people upset. But you have to be willing to do that. One of the things that I think is the hardest for people in race control or people on the tech side of things, and it takes a different person to want to do this, because ultimately there's going to be a time where you are going to make a call or not make a call that makes somebody upset, makes somebody mad, and they're going to be 100% certain that their way was the right way and you either didn't call it or you called it incorrectly. And it takes a thick skin and a special person to do that. There are many a race director that I can name, and I can only think of one in my history of being a fan of IndyCar racing and being around it, that universally, and maybe it's because it's sort of revisionist history, but universally, Wally Dallenbach would be the one you look back and everybody goes, that was the guy. But I don't know what it was like in the moment, right? And we didn't have social media, we didn't have all the other things that happened there. But Brian Barnhart was amazing when he started, right? And over time, you get to a point where you make people mad. And I use a sort of personal reference. My dad was a judge growing up, and he had to do divorce cases. And I can remember one time my dad coming home and say, the worst thing about divorce cases is at the end of the day, you make both sides unhappy, because you either gave one spouse too much, or and he said you get in those situations where you may be universally liked for a while, and then over time, because part of your job is to adjudicate things, you end up upsetting people. And I have a lot of respect for Kyle and for Rocket and for the team, for those folks that'll go in there and make a decision. And yeah, they'll admit sometimes they make the wrong one, but they get in there every day and they truly care about our sport, and they truly care about trying to make it correct. And so I'll miss it a little bit. But honestly, I think I'm going to be better off focusing on how do we grow our sport, how do we take the Fox relationship and build on that, how do we bring other partners in, how do we close our deals with our engine manufacturers so that we know in 2028 we got great partners as we go forward. NTT, we got to make sure we keep people like that in our sport, and that's really where my time's going to be better spent. So hopefully we won't have issues, but yeah, I'll miss it a little bit.
Bounce around a little more here, quickly here, maybe to close on the IOB side. So IOB will indeed, MDO will indeed hire and or retain however many folks to fill out all aspects of that. What takes place in the meantime, Doug? And again, I realize this is being passed off, so it's not your decision, but you mentioned Rocket, Kevin Blanche, been here forever, given his life to IndyCar. I would imagine there's a lot of very good folks who are in limbo, waiting to hear what direction things will take. Is there a timeline you think these folks will know, whether they're carried over from 25 or new folks might be brought in? Probably not a place uncertainty is wanted.
Honestly, the hardest part of all of this, and it really started in May, I think, when we said, look, we're going to have independent officiating by 2026. The hardest part has been staff. For the folks, and most of our folks that come on race weekend, not unlike other motorsport, are people that have full-time jobs somewhere else. They're engineers or bankers or lawyers or factory workers, but they love our sport and they're trained to do certain jobs. They started wondering, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to come back? And really, there was no way for us to answer that, because ultimately it's not our decision. It's the IOB and the IOB staff's decision on how that's going to work. The good news is what we continue to do is we continue to think about, here's roughly how many people we have on the road. Let's make sure we have the right hotel rooms. Let's continue to do the process so that when we hand this over, that the IOB isn't necessarily starting from scratch in a lot of those areas. So yesterday's meeting, the good news out of yesterday's meeting is I believe that the board was going to send communication to those staff members to let them know where they are, let them know that the board's constituted, and so we'll begin to move forward. The board knows that ideally we need this group to be able to show up at an open test and be prepared to at least go through the motions, make sure we're good, and then certainly by the time we get to the end of February, March for St. Petersburg, they have to be there. So the urgency to get this up and moving is there, and the three board members understand the urgency. The fact that they were able to basically get announced on Friday and then come from three different places on the planet and show up and spend an entire day together on Thursday, shows you that they are pretty committed to trying to get this done.